Hey guys, welcome to the Hypertrophy Hub podcast. So for one, I would like to say thank you so much for listening. It has been a fantastic year. This year has seriously made it for me. I've started online coaching, and it's on the way for me to making this my career, which is the end game goal, obviously. So I would just like to say I am taking spots for anyone who wants to sign up for coaching for next year. If you want to see what I've done so far, some of my client transformations are up on the Hypertrophy Hub Instagram. I'm also releasing a lecture style video very soon. Basically everything that I think is useful for a relatively advanced or intermediate sort of learner in terms of hypertrophy. And that will be completely free on my website when the website gets released. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoy. Thank you so much for listening this year. And I really hope you enjoyed this episode. This episode is with Brandon Roberts. We dive into hypertrophy in pretty much a range of aspects. We sort of start out on sarcopenia, but then we dive into the mechanisms of hypertrophy, his experience as a bodybuilder in prep, and just a variety of other topics regarding hypertrophy science, etc. You know, kind of literally everything we like to talk about on this podcast. But yeah, I wish you all a happy 2019. There may be one more episode. I mean, happy 2020, that crossover. This might be the last episode of this year, although I doubt it. There'll probably be one more coming in the next week or so. But I hope you all have a Merry Christmas, and I will talk to you again soon. Thank you very much for listening. Hey guys, welcome to the Hypertrophy Hustle Show. So this week I'm speaking to Brandon Roberts. So Brandon Roberts is primarily a researcher. He's also a coach, and he works with the strength guys. So Brandon, one of the things that I've seen that you've done a lot of interesting research in was sort of around sarcopenia and sort of the neuromuscular aging. Would you be able to sort of talk about what is that? And then also in terms of that, is it a massive problem? Is it sort of just something that's a little bit of an issue, or where do you sort of see the current state of that?
Yeah, so I'll tell you how I got into kind of aging research and kind of a little bit of personal story, and then into the research side. But as a personal trainer during my PhD and master's, I trained a lot of older adults, right? And so those are some of the most kind of consistent, committed clients. If they are that, they're always there. They'll like call you and be like, "Hey, I'm here 30 minutes early. Do you want to start early?" And I'm like, "No." So anyway, I kind of picked up an interest there because you could see, even in your family or my family or whatever, you could see people losing size over time. And so in the kind of a different aspect, you also see them losing muscle size, right? So at first when I saw people getting older and like getting smaller, I didn't know what it was. And then I figured out, okay, well, it's muscle. They're losing muscle mass, which is bad. And you see grandparents and people, older adults, kind of struggle to move as much. And so I was like, well, I like resistance training, and I'm working with these older adults, and it helps a lot. Let's kind of segue that, combine those, and take my muscle physiology background and go do some research in that area. And so sarcopenia has a lot of different definitions. It's actually very hard to describe it exactly, but the easiest way is just losing muscle mass with age. That's a simple. And over about 65 or 60, 65, somewhere in there, you lose about 1% to 2% per year. So just think that's just like a younger person, they want to gain that much muscle per year, but an older adult's losing that just every single year if they're not training or doing anything else. So that's kind of my background and how I got into it. But it's a big interest of mine in the general concept of sarcopenia.
And I feel like it's one of those things where you wouldn't even think about it until you know someone who's got it, or like you see it in action. Like, so for instance, as I mentioned off air, it's like being a sort of podiatrist. It's like you kind of get to see certain things where you look at them and you're like, oh my gosh, it's like diabetes. You get to see it and you're like, oh, that's why it's an issue.
Like you kind of get diabetes bad, but then you see like, okay, so this person needed to have their foot amputated. It's like there's sort of the end game cause of that, or like this lady can't stand up because she just doesn't have the strength. It's like those kind of things that is absolutely frightening. And then in terms of that, do you think it's the kind of problem where it's like it's progressively getting worse as society ages, or do you think is it just a problem of old age as we increase the lifespan, or like why is it becoming an issue?
Well, as in America, we had like the boomers, where the population increased massively, and all of those people are aging up now and becoming older adults, or right around there. So it's an issue in that aspect of just more people are having sarcopenia occur to them and having the health detriments of that. I think from I'll stick to the U.S. because I don't know globally, but I don't know that it's getting any better or worse. I would say it's probably staying the same. The research has obviously made a lot of headway in the past 10, 15 years, but your average person, I don't think the percentage of people has changed who are like resistance training or, exercising in general. Like they know it's a problem, just like, you're not supposed to become obese, but I don't know if they're doing anything about it.
Yeah, I feel as though with resistance training, it's like one of those things where people are still somewhat scared of it. Or this is why I always think of hypertrophy as sort of a mechanism for health. But then I find the major roadblock tends to always be application of it. It's like, it's such, I would say like you get someone to do cardio and like anyone can go and do cardio. But it's like, I find resistance training is like generally to do it correctly, you need some guidance.
Yeah, and if you're an older adult, right? So we do kind of trials here, and like working with these patients or subjects or participants, whatever you want to call them. Some of their real concerns are like, "Hey, am I going to have a heart attack?" And I'm like, "Well, no, but I never really thought that would be like you would think that, right? As a younger person, you're like, yeah, I'll go train, I'll be fine." So it's just little things like that of, oh, I don't want to hurt myself too. So.
So do you find the main sort of difficulties with training people like that sort of is a bit of fear? Like it's usually like fear of being fragile, I guess, in a way, or like fear of not being able to be okay after?
I think that's part of it. And I'll segue into another story. So it was Thanksgiving here not too long ago. Went to see my grandparents. They're getting old. My grandpa's like 92 and my grandma's like 87 or something. And my kind of the older generation. So once you get past 80, like things go downhill fairly fast in your skeleton, especially if you're not doing anything. So seeing him struggle to like walk around and get up, I was like, oh, okay, well, I can do something about this. So I gave him some exercises, just like some basic body weight stuff. But, I was talking to my family, and it's like, well, has he ever exercised before? And it's like, well, no. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a barrier of itself, right? Even if he was 20, right? Taking someone and having them exercise who's never done it before, like you're trying to do that at like 60, 70, 80, 90 is just a whole nother game. So I think, I don't know how we fix that, but I think that's a big barrier.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things where I find what you generally see is like someone will either exercise consistently all the time or basically not at all. It's very, and I guess it's one of the things that really sort of, I don't know, it confuses me because I'm in this space, but it's like I find it quite fun and like I find it interesting. But then I guess if I wasn't allowed to do weightlifting and I had to go and do any other form of exercise, I probably wouldn't do it. So it's like I can kind of see it, but then again, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's hard to see the true value of it because I guess people will put so much impact on other things like, okay, I need to eat clean and I need to blah, 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 and do these things and sort of, one of the things that I find is interesting is, for instance, something like diabetes. It's sort of commonly said that it's hard to solve that problem with just education. Do you feel as though this is a problem that could be solved with education or just solving the individual cases? Or Yeah,
I mean, education usually helps. I was reading, so I was kind of preparing for this podcast, reading a bunch of reviews and stuff just to kind of refresh because I haven't talked about it in a while. And it seems like you can educate, but you really need to show people. So like part of the education is like taking them to a gym and showing them how to do things, like you said earlier. But then, you know, there's always people who just don't want to exercise, and you can't make someone exercise. I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah. And I find the more you think about it, the more it's like, it's good now that sort of more people are becoming open to like literally just the idea of like leaving reps in reserve, right? It's like for a population like this, it's very much like, okay, we need them to grow. I don't think you probably wouldn't need that much stimulus for them to grow, I assume.
No, and in fact, like if you just get them to do one set, that's sufficient for growth and strength, in that it'll increase their quality of life, right? Yeah. Even if you just go in and you have someone do like a little circuit, and it's, you know, they don't have to go to failure. They can be a couple of reps short, but just that stimulus is enough to change people's lives. Now, it's better if you can get them to do 3 sets, right? But like, if they hate it and it takes 20 minutes, I mean, I'll take that any day.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, if I reckon if we could just get everyone in the world to do like a few sets of leg press a week, just like 3 sets or something, some really simple exercise, like I reckon we'd all be way healthier. But by like just a stupid number, we'd be way healthier. But it's like, you know, it'd be so little time. But obviously, it's not a logical solution. It's like it's kind of like a idealistic solution, but it's like, I don't know. I find it in these populations, it's like, especially with the older generation, it's like, do you find is it a process where you can take them from like quite dire to like sort of, okay, now they can move around a lot more?
Yeah, so I think you can, especially if they commit. One of my older clients, his goal was to just like be able to hold a milk jug, so a gallon of milk, gallon of water. He was like, and so after 12 weeks or whatever it was, he was like, yeah, I can totally hold it upside down like this now. And I'm like, okay, that's a win. Like, bank that for later, because we're deadlifting right now, and I've got another one that you could try later. So picking up, you know, that old box in the closet or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, I don't even remember your original question. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's pretty. I think it's like one of those things where it's like you hear a goal like that and you're like, damn, like it kind of, like, I love bodybuilding, I love hypertrophy, but it's like you hear a goal like that and you're like, damn, like that matters. Like, imagine like not being able. This is why, like, I don't want to be a podiatrist, but like it opened my eyes to a lot of things. It's like someone's goal doesn't have to be like it. Like, I would say it's more impactful if someone's goal is like picking up a milk jug. It's like to me, it's just like, wow, it's like that's your goal, and if we get that, to them, it's like that's like life changing.
Yep.
It makes me as someone who's just finished my undergrad thinking, okay, what should I do for masters? It's like, I love hypertrophy, but it's making me think like, do I go for a more, and like, have you found in the past, do you find a different, this is more of like a philosophical kind of question, but it's like, do you find different levels of like meaning from different sort of kinds of research? Like for instance, the research on sarcopenia versus like, say, like research specifically on hypertrophy and like furthering hypertrophy for hypertrophy's sake. Like, do you find a sort of difference?
Yeah. I think there is a difference, and the main difference is when you actually, like, because you have to see it, because if you're not working with people, or you're not at least around the people who are training, or, you know, whatever they're doing, like, it's just a number. It's just like, okay, well, you know, my guy sends me the data, and they both hypertrophied via DEXA like 1 kilogram. I'm like, okay, cool. So I don't have any connection to the intervention. But if I'm in the gym and I'm, you know, helping someone, then I do see it. So I would say, as long as you're connected somehow, I think it's more fulfilling. But if it's just a number, then I don't know that it's quite the same, at least from my kind of experience. I'm sure there's a lot of differences in people too.
Yeah, I find it, at some points, I can feel quite, like, maybe the word's fatalistic about hypertrophy in some ways. It's like a little bit like, oh, this doesn't matter. But then again, it's like, I would say it does. It's like this is why I would love to research obesity and diabetes, because it's like that shit. It's like a tidal wave. Like it's just like, I find it so frightening. And then, but the thing is, I love hypertrophy, and there's hundreds, thousands of people who love hypertrophy. It's like just like, and it's like, I don't know. I find it hard to draw the line. But it's like I as a researcher, right? It's like, you're contributing to I heard a good analogy. It's like a leaf on a branch on a tree in a forest. It's like you're contributing to that sort of thing. But then it's like, you still know that it has like meaning and all that. Like when you publish something, do you feel as though it's like, can you see its impacts ripple? Because it's like, for me, as someone who's never done research, we always have these ideas about research, but we don't know anything about what it's actually like to do research. It's like, we just see, like, we'll talk to someone who does it, and then we're like, okay, get a little bit of an idea.
Yeah. So to peel the curtain back a little bit, so we just had a paper published that was submitted like a year ago. Experiments were done like 6 to 8 months before that.
Wow.
So oftentimes when you see something published, even if it's a preprint, or it's like on the internet, but it's not in paper yet, I mean, that's kind of like old news to researchers. So they don't get as excited. I think the hope is you do a study, or you find something out that's very impactful. But an example of where maybe that doesn't happen is, so we did a clinical trial a couple years ago where we kind of optimized the resistance training dose for older adults, and it ended up being like a high intensity session on Monday, a low on Wednesday, and a high on Friday, right? So intensity is relative to 1 RM. And it was like, okay, well, if you looked at that group compared to the 3 other groups, they hypertrophied quite a bit different. But that paper or that result won't necessarily have an impact for 5 or 10 years, because all the studies that are ongoing now, right, they didn't know that happened, and they're not going to change mid-study.
Right.
So you see a ripple effect, but it's a long way away. And that's kind of like, as a young researcher, it's kind of frustrating sometimes to be like, no, I did this thing, and you all know about it because you've been at conferences, but nobody cared. And then 10 years later, it's like, oh, everybody cited it. It's got like 200 citations. Well, okay, maybe it matters.
Yeah, but I guess it's like, you have to, like, 10 years is a long time. It's like, for me, it's like, 10 years ago, I was 10. That's all. I was 11. So it's like, damn. Yeah. And it's like, I guess, and I feel like research isn't one of those careers you get into if you want to be like, okay, I'm going to be famous, I'm going to make a bunch of money. It's like, it's one of those careers you do when you like, how can I solve a problem the best way? Like, you get people that will be sort of fatalistic about research and basically say, all research is corrupt, doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's, I would say, from what I would know, I would say that's pretty incorrect. Like, I would say largely research is pretty good. Like, there is obviously corrupt stuff, but it's like, I don't think it's wide enough to be that massive of a problem. Like, but from my limited knowledge outside of the field.
No, and so I review for a lot of journals, and like, I've seen stuff come through that's skeptical, and the reviewers, usually there's 3 reviewers in peer review, and you'll see people just completely destroy it and be like, no, that's not, like, that doesn't match anything, that goes against everything we know, so you're gonna have to step back and figure this out, come back later. So there's an aspect of, you hope it's worth something, and you'll also hope that others in the field kind of check each other. It's like, you see these mini battles, like volume, intensity stuff on the hypertrophy side. Those happen every single field. Like obesity, like you see Kevin Hall with low carb versus insulin hypothesis, like all of this stuff. So everywhere you go, and no matter if it's cancer research or whatever you want to study, it's there. So they always keep each other in check. Or that's the hope.
That's probably good. It's probably like a good thing that there's like, because I guess if someone makes a claim and it's false, then I've been thinking about this a lot recently, right? It's like I think anyone should be allowed to have any conversation, and even if it's public, like, they should be allowed to have it. But like, as society, it's our job to not shit on bad ideas, but just explain logically without like ad hominem attacks why an idea is bad or false or whatever, or why it's dangerous. Like, I think it would be the best idea to let everyone talk, right? But then it's like, we don't have to give them a platform through like a certain thing, but it's like they should be allowed to talk as long as it's not like hate speech. And then it's like, I would say largely it's basically our job to basically say, this is why it's wrong. Here's a much more logical solution. But then the problem, I guess, comes when you have someone who's sort of quite convincing in their position, even if their position's sort of wrong or dangerous or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if they've been like kind of well respected for a long time. And maybe it's not even like them purposely trying to deceive people. It's just they kind of start floating one way. Yeah. And you're like, okay, well, you're a really good scientist for a really long time, but man, lately you just slowly have been going that way. So and it's pretty rare. Like most scientists don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Like I find most people stick within their wheelhouse. Like especially in science, it's like especially in exercise science, it seems it's like it's not like a field where you're like rolling in the money. So it's not like people are doing this to like lie and cheat their way to the top. It's like
I have. Just to give you a comparison, so I'm again a young researcher, not even a true professor yet. My friends make twice as much as I do, and and will probably for a long time. But I really enjoy what I do, and that's part of it. And
I feel like it's the meaning.
Yeah, and also in academia and research, you work a lot, but it's kind of attracts the people who spend a lot of time working. Like there are other fields that do the same, probably business and entrepreneurship and stuff like that. But it like people are here all the
time. Well, I feel like it's the kind of thing where it's like for me, it's like if I never do research, I'm going to be so disappointed. It's just like, to me, it's like I just want to contribute towards solving these questions. It's like something like diabetes. To me, it's just like the most frightening thing on the planet. It's like I could, if I don't ever contribute towards solving that a little bit, I'll be disappointed in my contribution to this planet. So we'll see.
Yeah. I won't talk about it too much on the podcast, but I'll follow up with you and maybe we can get you connected with some researchers or something.
That'd be very cool.
All around. Or I pretend to know people.
Cool. Sounds good. That'd be fantastic. One of the things that I found was like an interesting sort of tie between two kind of populations, and it's sort of like you have the sort of sarcopenic population, then you have sort of an untrained gen pop population, and like I would say in general, especially I'm assuming to maximize adherence, lowest useful dose I think of volume would be the way to go. Would you generally agree with that? Do you think there's sort of, I guess it's a lot different with sort of gen pop, like just normal, no comorbidities, but I think there's quite importance to like emphasizing the message of like lowest possible doses or lowest useful dose is usually a pretty good idea.
Yeah, and you can get away with a little bit of work getting a big result for 4 to 6 months, right? So I think utilizing that and saying you only have to do, especially the people who don't like to exercise, like you only have to do this much, and then your hope is after a while they'll either like it or they'll be like, okay, well I did this much and I'm kind of stuck. So how do I get unstuck? The other aspect is, this is all more biobehavioral, which I don't really study that much, but it's okay. So now we got you working out. Can we now get you to stop drinking soda or something that's just, like you look at it and you're like, I know I shouldn't do that, but smoking's another good one, but it's really hard to get people to quit smoking. So that's the next step is can I alter something else in their life that helps them too? And then slowly you can make incremental changes and get where you want to be.
And I feel like this is why I wish I'd sort of trained people in person at some point, because it's like all my clients they already know their stuff. They're already committed to this stuff. It's like they're already kind of at that level, most of them. It's like, it's definitely a group that I would like to look into at some point. But yeah, in terms of all these things, we're like this sort of ties into that. It's like with that, I find a lot of the time we'll have like the mechanisms of hypertrophy, right? And like that's always, it's like for someone like myself and yourself, it's like that's really interesting. But then you get a population like that, and I don't think we even need to make them think about it. Like, it would definitely not make them think about it, but even, do you think it, I guess it wouldn't play much of a role in their programming? Like, it's kind of like the main thing is getting them in the door. Like, it's just like mechanisms
Yeah,
of hypertrophy would play a role for.
right. And so I guess when I kind of when we're recruiting people, we definitely don't talk about any of that. What we talk about is, these training sessions will help you improve your quality of life. They'll help you get up and move across the room better. They'll help you like cognitively just feel better. They'll help you sleep better. Maybe you do have kind of insulin sensitivity problems. Maybe they'll help with those. Maybe your medications, your blood pressure medications, maybe you can reduce the dose and not have as many side effects. Now, all that is like with doctor approval, of course, but those are the things that you kind of talk about in a positive light. Say there's a lot more than just like, oh, you're gonna get bigger legs.
Because I guess for them, like that's probably the least of it. Like it's like it's much
Definitely.
more like, how can this have a positive impact?
Yeah, because they don't care about looking good most of the time. They're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, I just want to live nice.
Yeah. Do you feel as though hypertrophy, like, do you think it is a pretty so if we like in general for the general population, I see it as like, I would say for most people it's pretty useful for their health. Like even if you aim for hypertrophy, like people often see hypertrophy as a purely selfish thing or purely vain thing, and I find it's so like it, and like us who like love hypertrophy obviously know that it's not. But then again, it's like, do you find that like there's other disease populations or other just even general populations where it's like that? I find it like it seems to be above and beyond like one of the best things that people can do. Like even compared to like cardiovascular fitness, it's like, to me it seems like it's just like really, really impactful compared to it.
Yeah. So again, I was reading a little bit and I got curious and I was like, okay, like I've written some reviews on sarcopenia and training and stuff, but I've never seen anyone write one on aerobic versus resistance training, right? Because ideally you do both, but maybe you only like one or you only have time for one. And it turns out that if you're gonna pick one, resistance training will get you almost all of the benefits that aerobic training will, plus the strength and neuromuscular stuff. So if you think about blood pressure, heart rate, like you can get a cardiovascular response with training. And for people who are untrained, it doesn't even take that much, right? So you can use that to your advantage and say, well, ideally you do both, but if you can't, and we want you to do resistance training. And I think sending that message, because research has been so focused on aerobic training for a very long time, and I'm not talking in the past 20 years, I'm like last 60 years. Like they started doing in the Harvard Fatigue Lab like aerobic training. They did VO2s and oxygen uptake things. And so for like 30, 40 years, nobody really did that much resistance training. And then in the 90s, I would say, probably it is where it kind of took off outside of the bodybuilders and the strength athletes and things like that. Like in the general population, the 80s, late 80s, early 90s is when people started really training. See gyms popping up everywhere. But yeah, that's kind of the comparison I like to tell people is, you can get the same benefits, but do one of them and I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I find people always like, for instance, I haven't done pure cardio. Like I walk a lot. So, I mean, I take that into account, but I haven't done pure cardio in a long time. And I feel relatively healthy all over. And it's like, but I lift all the time. And it's like, I find it's like, I would much rather everyone in the world start lifting rather than going for a run. Say the frequency and duration is the same. It's like, I would much rather they start lifting. It's just like, it feels like it. I don't know. I feel like it's still very underestimated. Like, I feel like it's one of the best things people could do for their health. Like, if you have a shit diet, that's probably like number one thing we can fix. But then it's like exercise might, like lifting weights or hypertrophy or however you want to put it, like that might very well be second or even first. It's like depending on the individual. It's like, and it's just like, I don't know. It's almost like magic. Like it's just like, to me, it's like baffling how well it works, and we know exactly how to make it work. And it's just like, there's very few people who it doesn't work on, and it's like some people. Do you think there's non-responders at all? Or?
So that was one area that drew me into this kind of field, and I think in one measure there might be some non-responsiveness, and that measure would be muscle size, and specifically like muscle fiber size. It almost actually I feel pretty good saying everyone gets some positive benefits, right? Maybe it's not hypertrophy, but there's all those other ones I talked about earlier. But there might be non-responders to kind of muscle fiber hypertrophy. And we see it in our studies, and I still struggle with it because it's really hard to just think that could happen. But there are other factors, especially in older adults or disease populations, where you're like, all right, well, these people are maybe they're partially inflamed, so maybe as you age, we have it's called inflammaging or inflammaging, however you want to pronounce it, but we see increases in cytokines like TNF-alpha and IL-6, things that aren't good. So maybe that's happening on an accelerated rate in the muscle, and maybe that's blunting or stopping this hypertrophy from occurring, but you still get everything else.
Right.
So I think we're still trying to figure that out. And then even then within that, so if you're a non-responder to one dose, how do you fix it to can you lower it or raise the dose, or where do you go from there? Or is it just like you're screwed? And so now there's beginning to be kind of these what we call SMART trials, where they'll have kind of interventions. So say it's a 20-week study. So they'll go 0 to 10 weeks and they'll measure hypertrophy. And then they'll split people into like responders and non-responders. And then the non-responders, they'll say, okay, well, you were on this dose, and now we're going to split those into a higher dose than they were originally doing or a lower dose, right? And so you can get at kind of what do they need, which is exactly what trainers do. They just don't have the tools to kind of measure things. But it's always testing, analyzing, kind of the participants don't necessarily have any like feedback. Like if they say, well, I really don't like this, you have to be like, well, cool. Sorry.
You're like, sorry, mate. Stuck with it.
Part of the study. Tough it out for us.
I find it's one of the things where I'm like, like it just seems so damn useful. Do you feel as though hypertrophy is like would you say it's not the thing driving the changes, or do you think it's a result of the changes? Like this is something that I'm struggling to wrap my head around, right? Like, is the adaptation the main thing that's making the difference, or is it like the actual doing the activity and the sort of the responses acutely that occur? Like,
so I would think of it this way, right? So if you're at homeostasis, you're just walking around, and you give a stimulus, so training, your body's going to adapt so that if it faces that stimulus again, it's not as hard. That's the goal, right? And so I think hypertrophy is an adaptation to training or whatever you're doing to elicit that adaptation. Now, that's one of the reasons we see kind of diminishing returns, is because once you adapt to most things, it's like, okay, well, I did enough. I got out of homeostasis. I made it come back in where everything's normal again. But it's really not beneficial for me to put on a whole bunch of muscle, because then it's metabolically inefficient. It costs a lot of energy and all this stuff. So I think that's, to answer your question, it's an adaptation, but that's also why we see diminishing returns later.
Right. Do you mean so in terms of like the health I guess benefits, do you feel as though do you think the hypertrophy is the thing driving those, or do you think the activity is what's driving those? Or what do you like? Do you think like is hypertrophy a good goal to aim for, or is it just the active resistance training? Like, so for instance, should we actually? Obviously, I would say hypertrophy is largely good, but is it the from what you've seen? Do you think it's like is the hypertrophy the thing that's driving those changes, or is it
okay, I
the
gotcha.
process of getting there? I guess.
Yeah. So in older adults, it's the process is the important thing because lots of things are changing. If your goal is hypertrophy, then that's what you care about. But just the process of training, you have so many other benefits that yes, a bit as you age, a bigger muscle, having more muscle is beneficial because you're going to lose it, right? So if you start out with more, you'll be okay for longer. Muscle is also kind of an endocrine organ, so it combats some of the inflammation. It's metabolically active. It does a lot of different things. We're actually still trying to figure out what all it does. So having muscle is a good thing. So that would be the effect of hypertrophy. But I would say if you're going to compare those two, probably everything else versus hypertrophy, everything else is more important.
Right. Yeah. Because I think it's quite interesting because I've been reading a lot of research in terms of like diabetes and hypertrophy, and it's like the goal in those studies is to elicit hypertrophy, right? But then it's not clear. They're not really outlining the hypertrophy is the thing. Like, say if we could take a pill and just cause hypertrophy with no other repercussions or adaptations, it's like I would wonder if it would have similar response. I would probably guess no, right? It's like,
yeah, probably not. You would probably, and diabetes is a little bit different because, your muscle is a glucose sink.
yeah.
And so if you had more muscle, you would think, all right, well, that's probably just beneficial in general. And I feel fairly comfortable saying it is, but older adults need a lot of other stuff too. So.
Yeah. I feel like it's just so, just such a complex problem. Would we be able to dive sort of into the mechanisms of hypertrophy and sort of the weight you place on them? Would that be sort of something that you're comfortable with, that you have sort of different areas in where you're sort of thinking?
Yeah.
Cool.
In
terms of that, do you feel as though, because people, as we sort of, for instance, most people, I think they've sort of only, the mechanisms of hypertrophy have sort of really been coming to prominence, like, or the public had more, or like the evidence-based scene, if you want to call it that, has sort of more been learning about them as of kind of recently, like the last year or two. It's sort of like that. Before that, it wasn't that well known. And I find, obviously, the main one is sort of mechanical tension, right? And then you have sort of the other ones, and it's sort of, people will sort of completely dismiss those. Do you think those ones are, from what you've seen, do you think those ones still have a lot of weight, or do you think they're so minor that they're basically not useful, or how do you generally feel about that?
Okay, so we have mechanical tension, metabolic, and then muscle damage are the three kind of overarching ones, right? So mechanical tension is definitely number one. The other two, it's really hard, especially muscle damage, because we know, well, actually, we think we know, there's only a couple studies on it. We know, or we think we know, we don't want to aim for muscle damage. But, I mean, there's like 3 studies on it. So how and they're not big studies. They're studies of like 10 to 20 people.
Wow,
Yeah. So when you think about it that way, it's like, all right, well, I just did a clinical trial with 100 people in it, and there are 2 groups. So that's 50 or whatever, pretty close. And so I'm more certain that those outcomes are real than if I'm taking something in humans, which are super variable, right? Like muscle protein synthesis or muscle damage markers, and trying to figure out what's going on at that level, because it's easy to say, oh, they're not different, it doesn't matter, right? But if you don't have the numbers, and you do power calculations, and sometimes you can figure it out, sometimes you just kind of have to go a little bit above where you want to be. But if you don't have the numbers, it's easy to say, oh no, there's no difference, because that's the null, right? So you have to have subjects to test what you're actually asking. And I think in exercise science specifically, we struggle with that because if it's not disease related or aging related or something related, we just can't get enough money to really study it in the States, at least. Outside of the States, it's actually a little bit better. But so I think tension is probably, I'd call it king. Muscle damage is probably tertiary, but only because we don't know a ton about it. Like it might be that, I'll give you a speculative example. It might be that for the first 12, 16 to 20 weeks, muscle damage isn't important. Like it happens, right? But yeah, whatever. We don't care. Just put more weight on the bar. But then at year 3 or something, maybe you need a little bit of muscle damage to grow further or to adapt further or to get stronger or something. Like we have no idea because most of these studies are in untrained subjects too. So I get nervous when people start like making a hierarchy in things that we don't know. Like, I feel comfortable saying, mechanical tension is the driver because we have lots of data to show that. But to completely dismiss the other two, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, if you look at the PFR literature, right, metabolic stress, you can occlude-ish some muscle, and you can get some muscle hypertrophy. But there's some studies who have shown that, hey, if you don't occlude and you do 30 reps with the same weight or a higher weight or something, you get the same hypertrophy. It's like, well, okay, so you could do both. Does that mean one's not relevant? Probably not. An example of when we use metabolic stress in studies is a good one. So in knee replacements, right? So you get your knee hacked off. We can occlude the quad, put them on a leg extension or leg press or whatever you want to do with it, and get the same stimulus as them lifting, right, a much heavier weight. And for those people, that's really important because they're trying to recover. But I think it's hard to tell with metabolic stress and muscle damage where exactly how important they are, and I hesitate to kind of jump. And I don't know if we'll ever know because it might take like 50 years.
Yeah, we might be dead by the time we finally figure out, but fingers crossed we're not. So, but I find because people will. I would agree. It's like I find it. I think it would be dangerous to let it dictate your programming. For instance, it would be like for instance, I think a phase where you're doing higher volume is like probably a good idea. Like higher volume, higher rep ranges, etc. Just aiming to achieve metabolic stress. Like it's like I think that could be good. Like every now and then, but it's like if you tried to just minimize muscle damage because you didn't think it was useful, it would be like. Or some other way of programming to like try and really adhere to them. It's like, well, like if you get stronger, you get stronger. Like if you're getting strong across like a variety of rep ranges, there you go. You're basically ticking the boxes, and it's like, I don't know. I think I find it hard to see the cross applications of the mechanisms for hypertrophy and like programming. I find it. And especially if it's just chasing, I guess, obviously just chasing hypertrophy in this case.
Yeah, and if you look at a lot of like the people who study hypertrophy, like Schoenfeld and whatnot, a lot of times they'll say, do somewhere between 2 and 5 sets, do 6 to 12 reps, and it's like you kind of get these big windows, and you're like, all right, well, I'm in there, and that's because those windows exist because we have research to support them, but we don't have research to say, oh, you know what, if you do a 4-week block of high volume right before a 4-week block of low volume, it'll work better. Like I don't know. Like maybe not. Maybe it's opposite. Maybe if you go like high, low, So that's the old school periodization aspect of, we're gonna do this thing which is originally built on peaking athletes for an event, but we're gonna try to apply it to all this other stuff. So you just have to be careful, and it's hard to know all of this if you're not in the field too, right? Because when I was 20 or so, I was reading all this stuff on the forums and Reddit and whatnot, and I'm like, I don't know, like, what do I do? And then you find programs, and you're like, well, which one's the best? It's like, well, I don't know. At this point, they're all going to work. I just got to do one, kind of stick to it.
Yeah. To me, it's like, okay, well, how well will you adhere to that? Like, do you enjoy that program? It's like, to me, it's like, there was a while where I was like, I don't want to do anything in the gym. And I knew I should probably be doing higher volumes at that point, but I was just like, I was doing really low volume and just doing exercises that I'd never done before just for the fun of it. And it was like, I didn't make much progress, but it was like, it was fun. And it's like, when I'm really trying to drive progress, it's like, that's when I just basically do the same thing week in, week out, minimize novelty, just basically progress. And it's like, you know, I don't think programming needs to get that complicated. Although then I look at powerlifting and I would be scared to program for a powerlifter. I'd be like, oof, I'm not going to be optimal. This is not going to be optimal programming. I think I could do a decent stab at it, but it's like, then I would compare like my program, for instance, to like Kedrick or like anyone from TSG. And it would just be like, I doubt that I would do it as well or nearly as well. Like it would just be, I'd be missing a range of different things because I've never been a powerlifter. And it's more the practical application of that, not the knowledge of physiology. I think that's not the limiting factor, I would say. Like in my programming, it would probably be my knowledge of powerlifting, I would say.
Yeah, we were actually, so we have a group chat. We were just chatting about kind of force vectors and elbow and knee angles. And, you know, so I have a decent background on that stuff. But even then, I'm kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to have to do some old school math because you guys are in this all the time. And I'm, you know, I don't really have, I might have like one or two powerlifting people occasionally, but yeah, I'm not in it. And you're right. There's an aspect of being a powerlifter and coaching powerlifters for a long time. It's called, and we call that experience. So, right. I think that's what it is. It's like, I don't have enough experience.
Fair enough. Yeah. That's the strange thing being a young 21-year-old. I always try to humble myself a little bit, like make sure I realize that I haven't been lifting for that long. I haven't been engaging in the literature for that long. And then engaging being reading, engaging not being contributing. It's like there's a lot of things that I have to realize that I don't know or that I don't have a firm grasp on, which is, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I would say, you know, you and a lot of the younger people, because I mentor a few different people that are, you know, low 20s, and you're way better off than I was. So that's a win. So not
I think we're pretty lucky. Like, you go online and you have a vast array of everyone intelligent. And like, I think I'm especially lucky because I literally interview people like I interview the researchers. It's like,
yeah,
pretty lucky.
Yeah. So, but it does take effort, right? So, I also see so I just got off of competition season like a couple months ago, recovering now, fully recovered, you know, got the cheeks back. But you see athletes, young athletes, bodybuilders specifically, step on stage, and I had this happen to me where it's like, well, I lost my class, but the dude next to me is like 45. And you're like, well, yeah, of course you lost. You should lose. If that guy's doing the same thing you're doing, then he's going to look better pretty much no matter what. And now we're entering an area where there's so much information, like you said, that everybody's kind of doing the right stuff more. Yeah. And so it's just going to get harder and harder to like stand out, I think.
Yeah. I think that's why something like what Eric Eric Helms, what he sort of puts out a little bit, because it's like, he puts out a lot of messages around sort of like, okay, the thing is like, enjoy the prep. It's like, well, pretty much everyone in 3DMJ does. And like a lot of people do now. And it's like, it's fantastic because it's like, I know if I did a prep, I probably wouldn't do very well because so I have scoliosis. I'm very non-symmetrical. Like I'm never going to be the most symmetrical bodybuilder, and I'm okay with that. But then I think if I went into it thinking I'm going to fucking win this shit, I'm going to crush everyone, it would just be like, I would just be setting myself up for a massive failure. Yeah. And it's like bodybuilding prep is already incredibly difficult. And it's like, I don't know, you put that burden on it. It's just like, it's physiologically hard. And then if you make it psychologically harder than it already is, it's like, fuck. Did you have to like change your workloads at all? Like, I mean, when I say workloads, I mean like life workloads, like in terms of the research you were doing or coaching. Is like, did you find you had to sort of let other things sit, or?
I would, I don't remember, I think I was talking to Trexler about this, but I would strategically allocate my food to where if I had a meeting or if I had a presentation, I would have carbs right before. And so I could make it through like whatever the event was. But towards the last, 5 or 6 weeks, it's draining. Yeah. So yeah, there was a little bit of a drop off there, but I'm kind of fortunate enough that kind of fell in the summer where it's already slow.
Right. Yeah.
So I was doing okay. But yeah, it definitely does happen, and it's hard.
Yeah, because I was talking to Helms about it a while ago, and I was like, oh, when should I do a prep? And he's like, not during your masters. That's pretty much it. He's like, that's it. Like, just don't do it during your masters. I'm like, okay, no chance. And it's like, for me, it's probably a good idea as well. Keep gaining muscle, but it's just one of the things where I don't want to. When I prep, and I think I just don't want to. If I prep, I want to do it justice. Like, it'll be my first prep, right? So it's like I want to get fucking shredded, right? But it's like that comes at a massive toll, and it's like I don't want it to be the point that like then the podcast, all the episodes for 6 months just turn to shit, or like anything like that. It's like I would be
just work double time, and then you can just post them later. I have to do that the last 6 weeks.
Thought about that before, but then it would be like, oh, this new paper just got released in 2019, and it's like 2022. And we're like,
true.
Yeah, we'll see though. I don't know, but
to pull the two topics together. So I see, especially the local shows, you see a lot of older adults competing, and you just look at them and you're like, you are 70 something and you're on stage and you have as much muscle as I do. And they have the most fun too. I will say the older girls, they just enjoy it so much. So it kind of warms my heart when I see that. I'm like, oh, come be in my study.
Come be in my study.
Come be in my study, please. Let me study you.
Yeah, because I feel like at that age, it's like they've probably been doing it for so long, I assume, where it's like they're like, it can't be about like materialistic or like, it can't be about that anymore. It's like they're doing it for the fun of it, and it's like I wonder when I compete if I will be able to do that. That's what I cross my fingers and I hope that I'll be able to do it and be like, that was still fun even though I lost. Like I hope I can do that. Fingers crossed. But
yeah, for sure.
So should we end it off here? So I think that was a fun conversation because we went basically down a variety of places that I like. These are all topics that I'm absolutely in love with. So thank you for being on, for one. And two, where can people find you? So do you have, where can people go and get coaching if people want to read your research? Where's the best place they can do that? And if, for instance, if you're on Instagram, where people can find you?
I'm kind of everywhere. It's a little bit of a problem. It's actually working out okay. But so on Instagram, it's probably where I'm focusing most stuff is brob_21. That's my handle. And then Facebook, I'm fairly active on Facebook, but mostly I just post like monthly updates of like, these are all the cool things I'm doing. Back to Instagram. And then I have a Medium blog, which is just kind of where I write about, there's a good article about bulking on there. It's kind of long, but and so all that stuff's in my Instagram link tree. But Strength Guys, of course, strengthguys.com. And yeah, so that's kind of it. You can just kind of Google me, honestly, and it'll get there eventually.
Cool. So I would just like to say thank you guys so much for listening this year. It means the absolute world to me. This podcast has literally become the thing for me that is like, wow. Seriously, like it's given me a purpose in life. And whenever someone tags me in their story or sends me feedback about it, like I've gotten feedback that's just blown my fucking mind. And for me, it's like that for me is just insane. Like it's ridiculous that people listen. Seriously, like I can't get over that fact. But yeah, thank you guys very much for listening. Seriously, it means a lot. going into the new year, I'm going to be taking on a lot more clients. I'm going to be doing my master's in exercise science, as you've probably heard me talk about a lot of times on this podcast. I am ridiculously excited. This will be at AUT in Auckland, where I live. I'll probably actually be doing a few podcasts where it's just me talking pretty soon. However, I'm not quite sure yet. I'm not exactly sure what I want this podcast to become or be or whatever, but yeah, thank you guys all so much for listening. Seriously, it means the world to me. I'm glad that I can try and bring something unique to the podcasting space, as I think that's something that it needs, and I think it's something people aren't trying to do. I think people want to be unique, but I don't think they're actively trying to be unique. And I think one of my primary goals is to be unique, but then I think that does come with a lot of obstacles in the way. And that's not me just saying that it's difficult, it's me saying that I'm going to make some terrible episodes, and that's how it is. But then I think I've also made episodes where I'm seriously proud of them. And the only reason that I do that is because people actually listen. It's like, it's just, to me, it's honestly mind-blowing. But yeah, thank you guys all so much for listening. I'll leave you with all the soppy stuff. But yeah, Merry Christmas, and I will see you all next year.